Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be speaking about the 1921 Morgan silver dollar, going over all of its history and values depending on what condition it's in, whether or not it has any of the characteristics where if you look closely, you can see that it's a VAM. Those are going to be worth more because they're rarer and collectors want them. We'll also discuss some of the mint errors, which will be pretty obvious if you have it, but they're really cool to discuss. And there's two super special strikes of these that are going to be worth maybe several thousand or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those are the Zerbe and Chapman strikes. One's a proof, one's a special strike. But the main thing to note with 1921 fitting into the overall context, initially they were produced as a inflationary measure for political means that supported the silver industry out west, as well as helping out people who wanted there to be inflation because there was deflation after the Civil War. And in 1921, it had been like 16 or 17 years since they had last produced it. It was 1878 to 1904. So it was a totally different situation where there was a legislation, the Pittman Act, that mandated the melting or just procurement of U.S. domestic silver that would get coined into silver dollars to send to Great Britain to help them alleviate some of their concerns with their money. And that's exactly what we did. It wasn't super efficient. We ended up sending a ton of silver to Britain, but unfortunately, because the coins had the hubs, which make the dies that are used to strike the coins, actually were destroyed, so they had to remake them, and they were made with a lot less detail. Like there's less relief on the breast of the eagle where the feathers don't show quite as nicely, and the relief is shallower, which is just generally less visually appealing. And a lot of the coins went right into 1,000 coin storage bags. This is the most minted year at 44 million, but I'll go back to this slide. By far the highest amount of date and mint mark, a single one for the Morgan dollars, and especially in worn condition, they're not worth anything extra. Now, really nice examples like a Mint State 65 with very little marking and good eye appeal are rare because of the low quality of the strikes, even though there was a ton of effort put into making these coins. And a lot of them were melted during the 1970s silver price run-up, so they're still not rare by any means, but it wasn't like they're not as plentiful as the mintage might suggest. The Zerbe and Chapman proofs do exist. We'll cover that at the end of the video, but you do have to watch out for proof-like coins that are passed off as proof strikes or a special strike. So that's something to note. And then in terms of the specific valuations, the Mint State 65 sees like a double for Mint State 64. It's slightly more expensive. It really applies more to the D and the S Mint ones, but there's a little bit of added value for Mint State coins over like the base dates that are super, super common, though Mint State 63, 64, not even really in a huge way. The big value jump is from 64 to 65, and then a triple from 65 to 66. When it's so clean on the face, that's something that is really not too easy to come by. And then Mint State 67 is a massive jump. In terms of some of the VAMs, you can see right here identical die clash. So clash dies, there's no planchet between a coin, and somehow the dies come in contact, the obverse and the reverse. And the denticles from the obverse that surround the coin get imprinted and then struck onto all the future coins. This one's probably going to wear off if it's super worn, but the coin is not way more expensive than its regular counterparts, and it's sort of a neat feature that collectors find interesting when there are these major things that happen. Like here, again, valuation is not hugely different, but it's a super pitted reverse, exhibits pitting really all over the bottom of the wreath and all around the wreath, but then also extending a little bit beyond on the back of the coin. And then there's also a less pitted, but it's sort of more concentrated near the base of the, right under the feathers in the ribbon. And then there's also the wide reading. I want to say there's like 157 or so, as opposed to 189 reeds that go around the side of the coin, and there's a ton of different VAMs that exhibit this. It's not way more rare, but it was thought potentially that there were a few test collars that were used that had these wider reeds, and then the vast majority of these dollars get struck with the 189. So something interesting that you should be checking for. That one takes a little longer to check for and could be a bit tedious, but if you have the time or are interested in that VAM, look for it. A few other ones to note. So this one struck off center, maybe only 4 or 5%, but the coin, the planchet didn't properly get between the blanks, and part of it is outside of, where it should be. You can see the blank space up there. That's always an interesting error. There's a struck on the end of the strip error, so it's not a clipped planchet, but instead it's like there's strips of metal that are fed in that the planchets are punched out of, and then those planchets get punched or struck. And in this case, it looks like it was at the end of the strip, so there wasn't any metal here. It was just cut off, and the planchet didn't get punched out of anything. So it's a wonder that this escaped from the mint. There's also an obverse struck through. This one looks like some grease-filled dies or something, where there's going to be grease that gets between the planchet and the die, and that absorbs most of the detail. As you can see on the other side, almost a flawless strike. This sold for $700. Any of the Morgan dollar errors are pretty rare. And then right here we have the sort of king of the 1921 Morgan dollars and proof Morgan dollars in general, I'd almost say, the Chapman. There's only, I've heard it's more like 15 that were struck, but at least that was what sort of early thought said. But these are the only 1921 proof coins. They weren't really officially recorded, but they were supposedly struck for Chapman and then also for George T. Morgan. And he had like a rare coin business. These are extremely rare just because of their low mintage and range from several tens of thousands to the low 100,000s. There's also the more attainable Zerbe Special Strike. He was an influential coin collector and person in the industry, and he had a fair amount struck with. These are more viewed as specially prepared dies. They're going to be proof-like, so a little bit reflective, and they have a ton of hairlines, so that's a big differential, and you can see the values are quite high versus something like the average proof-like coins that are often tried to be passed off, or deep mirror proof-like, as one of these either proof or special Zerbe Strike coins. And the values here, you can tell, people pay up for these proof likes, especially the deep mirror proof like 1921s. I think those are gorgeous. But that pretty much brings us to the end. Glad to be able to talk about these two hyper rare Morgan dollars in addition to the other ones. Just a ton to look for, whether it's errors, VAMs, or something else. Really happy to be able to present to you today. Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to like the video, comment, and make sure to subscribe to my channel. And I also have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and some other social media platforms. You can also go to my main channel website, treasuretownYT.com, to learn more about the channel and sort of stay in contact. I also will eventually host all of these videos on coinsmetalscards.com, which will be both news, marketplace, and coin information. I do have the goal of eventually getting pretty much every US coin, date, mint mark, denomination on the channel with a similar video to the one that you just watched, and that will likely all be hosted there. And then I also have treasuretowncoins.com, which is sort of my coin dealing wing, coin dealing only entity that is a little bit less focused on content production. So thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you on some of my other videos. I also have videos that are not just the date, mint mark, denomination recap in this format, so you can check some of those out, and I'll have fun seeing you there.